Hmm. All right. I think I've set up about right. Maybe there. Okay. Well, let's give me a minute. Just one more thing. All right. Drop my whiteboard. Horse health. Let's talk horse health today. I've got a little bit of time while it sort of rains a little outside, and got an appointment, and got to pick up supplies. If you guys have watched the video from yesterday, I think went up very early this morning. Lots got done yesterday, and I need more stuff. I need more supplies. So, okay, let's talk. And I'm just going to open up on my tablet here so that I can see comments. I don't want to reach all the way up to the phone. It's up there. Whoa, too much volume. Give me a second. Just give me a second. All right. Teresa, hello. And David, how are you feeling? I worked an extra day, so I think I'm a little more stiff, but we had a good day on Sunday. Coffee time. Yeah, me too. Coffee. I want to talk about horse health today. It's a big deal. We've got a few things to talk about, mainly to do with things that can affect not only your own horse but other people's horses. And I think it needs to be talked about. I mean, mainly, I think my let's see. The way that I know, or the things that I know about, mainly apply to North America. So if you guys are outside of North America, I'm not sure if it exactly applies or if the exact names are applied. I believe they're very, very close, if not the same. But if I say anything that you don't know what it is, just say, I don't know what that is, or whatever. And we'll see if we can't look it up or something like that. Anyways, Sue's here. Jay is here. David's here. Victoria from London. Hello, Victoria. Hello, Sue. Good you guys can make it. This is a real off-the-cuff thing. I'm not, I didn't schedule this because sometimes when I do these, I just think, I know, I really want to talk about something. It's really important. That if I were to put it into the camera and then I got to go to the computer, and I thought, wow, just do this here. So, horse health. And primarily I want to talk about the Coggins test and a little bit about vaccinations and what that means. It's definitely coffee time. It is coffee time. So, one of the things that my veterinarian talks to me about rather regularly, when we start talking about, because he travels a lot, he actually travels quite a bit around. We live in the province of British Columbia in Canada, and it takes up the whole west coast. The ocean's here. Here's BC, and then we get the rest of the provinces. So he travels around the whole of BC, goes into the upcountry and stuff like that, and heads over to the island, and because we've got some islands here as well. So if we go across this narrow body of water, it's called the Salish Sea right now. It used to be called the Georgia Strait. YouTube just disconnected a little. Didn't crash. Anyway, so if you head across there's a bunch of islands and everything. So every environment sort of gives its own challenges for veterinarians. And So when him and I talk, we talk about a bunch of things. I usually save up a bunch of stuff and then I call him up. I'm like, hey man, so how's it going? And we'll start talking about stuff. And I think he also has some things that he gets triggered in his head that he'd like to spread some information out around. I don't know, maybe I'm thinking too much on it, but he's got such a wealth of information in his head, and so many people have said to him, "You should just write some books or something like that," because you've got. And of course, it's the same problem with all of us. If you're too busy to even write a book, or even to, too busy to schedule everything, you're probably gonna have a hard time writing a book. But one day, anyways. So one of the things that he talks about is vaccinations, and then recently we got into the conversation about a Coggins test. Um, and if we start with sort of the I think almost the smaller subject, which is vaccinations. Um, there are always there's always the two sides, and then there's in the middle. It's no different than when it comes to kids, and it's a big topic right now here in BC, or probably all of Canada, about vaccinating or not vaccinating children. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about horses. And some people are quite. I know some people who are quite against vaccinating their horses. They just do as little as they can, and then others that are just on the ball every 6 months or every year or whatever their veterinarian says, and whatever that veterinarian thinks about vaccinations, they're on it. They just do it. The horse gets vaccinated, and everything's dealt with. So I believe there are some vaccinations that are absolutely required and some that are a little bit optional. I usually go with what my veterinarian says because he's a little more conservative than I think others are, and will do the ones that are more required of our local area. So that's what I mean when I started out talking about him working in BC and then on the islands. So he's got a good understanding of what gets out there, what kind of problems horses have, and how to hopefully head it off at the pass. Because essentially vaccinations are just the idea that you give the horse a little bit of the problem, their immune system stays built up, so that if they ever get affected by something, then their body will fight it off, and that'll be that. But definitely, I would say that so it's going to depend on what's local to you guys. But there's one I believe that just stands out that has to be done, and it's it's mainly for when horses get wounds, and right now it's just escaped my brain of what that one is. Um, when you get poked by a rusty nail or something like that. Somebody help me out. It's just in my head and then it left. It's gone. Drink coffee while I think about it. Tetanus. Thank you, Teresa. Yes. Tetanus shots are an absolute requirement for horses because, and it's not like I've had direct experience with this, but I've got a whole bunch of stories from my vet who has told me that he's gone out to horses who haven't had their tetanus shots, and they've got some wound and they weren't able to recover. They ended up having to be put down. They were so wrecked and so wounded. But getting tetanus shots, I think that's probably the world around. I don't know if that changes. And then there's the other ones like rhino and West Nile and stuff like that. So some areas will have that a little bit stronger and some won't. Some won't have any of that. And so I'd say to anybody who's watching this, anybody who's kind of on the fence, or you're wondering, or you don't, even if you're watching me and you wonder what I do vaccinate the horses and make sure that they're up to date. For the most part, I'm not on the ball. I'm not, regimented, but I sort of keep up with what my veterinarian advises, and they come out and gives a quick shot. In fact, sometimes I ask if I can help out, and I think I've done penicillin, but that's different. It's not a vaccination. Anyhow, so yeah, absolutely. I think that it's very important, and if you don't do it, you're not going to kill your horse. I mean, some people say, well, my horse just stays in my backyard and doesn't go anywhere, doesn't see any other horses and stuff. That may be, but what if you die? What if you and any of the caretakers just, the horse has to go somewhere, and now you've got a horse that has not been vaccinated and is going to go out into the public sphere. Maybe that horse gets sold and stuff like that. So it's something to think about. I'm not saying go out and do it. I'm not telling you you have to. But my just general advice on this area is just try to keep up with it. Uh, it doesn't. It's not been proven to do any harm to your horses. Again, I fall back to science, and if there's any proven science that says vaccinations do these things that are bad to horses, I'd love to see it, but so far, not yet. Um, so, let's see. Lyme disease. Lyme disease comes from the ticks. Um, and I'm not familiar with a vaccination that deals with Lyme disease. Is there one? Maybe there is. We should look that up. Um, Most of the vaccinations are to deal with um, mosquitoes, primarily like the bloodsucker. I mean, the ticks are in there, obviously. I guess maybe there is one. Let's find out. So that's a good question. Hey, Carla. Sue loves Vancouver Island. I do too. Okay, yeah. So let's look up, or because it's a learning opportunity for me as well. I'm not saying I know everything, but I do know some things that I just want to share. Um, and Lyme disease is not something I'm familiar with in regards to having a vaccination and having it be prevented. Skipping the rabies vaccination, I wouldn't. I'd, I mean, depending, I suppose. Um, I'd ask why. Why skip it? Is there a reason? Is this cost? You don't want to pay the $20 or whatever it costs to have that particular shot done. Usually, vets will do shots all in one. They'll have a mixture of vials and they'll do the 5 shots all in one or something like that. So I would say I don't see why you wouldn't. If you want to skip it, sure. But I mean, what if your horse gets bit by something that has rabies? I mean, I think that you'd probably want to have that. Um, I'd say there's always the critical thinking approach of it. Say, okay, should I get rabies? Why should I get rabies vaccination? Should I get rhino? Should I get West Nile? Should I get tetanus? Should I get, I can't remember what the other two are. And most of the time the answer is you should get it just in case of this, this, or this. And so when somebody says, well, I'm not going to bother getting that, you say, well, is there no chance of it happening? In such a case, I mean, rabies is super unusual. I mean, I don't know of any recent cases whatsoever that a horse has got rabies. So if you're just saying, look, I don't want to put more crap in my horse, that's totally logical. I agree with that. There's nothing wrong with that side. So, and is a horse going to pass on rabies? No, not likely. Are you risking your horse's life? Maybe a little. Of that tiny, tiny chance that some rabies-infested animal is going to come along and chew on your horse and give it rabies, that tiny, tiny chance, is it then going to affect your horse enough to have it die? Will it get rabies? Are you worried about it passing rabies on to something else? So that very, very, very tiny little risk might be like, I don't need rabies. Sure, why not? Forget it. So, the horse flu, yeah, influenza in horses is pretty big. So yeah, so I don't think rabies is a requirement per se, but I would sort of think, well, is it worth to take the chance? I mean, for us, I don't know if I would bother either, come to think of it. If my vet said you should get rabies because there was a recent case of something, 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 then I would probably just say, yeah, sure, go for it. It'd probably be a low cost compared to what it could be in the future. And if it's not going to adversely affect my horse, it's like there's no side effects, there's nothing. It's just a little, helping boost to the immune system of the horse in the case of. I'd say sure. So, how much does it cost to get? I mean, vaccinations are probably vet by vet. I can't remember what my vet costs, $70 or something like that. Or, I mean, he's already out, so in North America or in Canada, we have what's called a vet call fee. So you call the vet out, they automatically charge you anywhere between $50 and $100 just for showing up. And then from there, they do all their work. whether it's teeth or inspection, shots, wound care, uh, surgery. Who knows, right? So if your horse is scared of needles, get a good vet. Um, because the only way that you might be able to give them shots is to tranquilize them. And if you can't uh, get a needle in them to tranquilize them, then your vet has to be good at using, and I'm not kidding, using blow darts. You can tranquilize an animal, no problem. I mean, they do it all the time. But in the horse world, it's the same thing. They'll actually use a blow dart and get something into the horse through that to slow it down, make it sleepy, and then from there you can do needles. The thing about doing tranquilizers to animals when you have to do something to them that they don't like, teeth is a really common one. If anything, I'd say teeth is quite common to tranquilize for. Because it's kind of a rough procedure. They're grinding away the teeth and they got to open up their mouth, and it takes a lot longer if they're moving around and shuffling around and not handling it. So a more quicker approach really is just to tranquilize them, get them a little sleepy for a couple hours, and then move forward and get the job done and get out of there. So the thing about that is, if you have tranquilized your animal, you can actually still continue to teach them, but you're not going to get a response that will teach you where, when, and how to come off. So if you want to do needles, a lot of vets are actually really good at doing needle stuff, and they'll sort of pinch or they'll poke or they'll and you yourself, if you've got it domesticated, you can actually catch your animal. They hate needles. What you can do is you can just take a normal syringe and get them good with you holding the syringe. If they hate needles, maybe they've had a very bad experience with needles. Somebody's come up with that's a syringe, and I don't think I have one handy around. No. Anyways, here, I've got a screwdriver at least. So say you've got this syringe, pretend it's a syringe, and you're coming up and you want to, poke the horse kind of idea. And as soon as you start to do that, they start to veer away and get away from you and stuff. Now you've got a training issue that you can actually work with. And it doesn't take long. It's no different than any, as long as you've got your groundwork there, as long as you can actually lead the horse and drive the horse and turn the horse and have the hindquarters kind of come out and around and stuff like that, then you can work on it. You can pet them and touch them and pet them and approach them and pet them and approach them and pet them, and rinse and repeat as often as you can. And then when you get that thing up, just start sort of just tap, 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 rub, 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 tap, 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 rub, rub. Till finally they're just calm. Make sure their head comes down and all that kind of stuff. Till something like this doesn't bother them. And then your vet will take over from that point. As long as they can get near them and get a needle somewhere near them, then they can kind of go from there. And a lot of vets are very experienced in this area. Obviously, they'd have to be, or else they probably wouldn't have a job. And a lot of times they'll just sort of pinch and pinch and pinch, and they'll pull and they'll pinch, and then it just goes in. And the horse is like, oh, what's that? And they sort of look a little bit, and then the syringe gets plunged kind of deal. And job's done. That's that. So no big deal. Anyways, so if your horse is scared of needles, you should work on it. It's very important to get that done. You never know when your horse is going to need something. Medical care is a big deal. If we're talking about horse health, it is so important. I mean, you guys have seen me do it with baby Gracie quite a bit if you've been watching. But it's so important to be able to touch and rub and hold and pinch and every part of the horse's body. Now, I don't have Gracie where I want her to be, and I haven't worked on it as hard as I'd like to. I've been working on other things with her. But she's terrible with her belly. She doesn't want her belly touched kind of thing. She's very sensitive around her stifle and stuff like that. So if she were to try to jump a fence and only one of her back legs made it over, she's very likely to totally scrape up the inside of her, whichever leg it is. And you got to be able to doctor that. And hopefully you don't have to tranquilize them. And so that's kind of a big deal. I would work at it. If I knew that my horse couldn't handle needles, which I guess I should probably make sure, because she's due for her shots. she's almost a year now here, so she's going to be due for a bunch of stuff. So I should probably check that out. Maybe I'll do a video about that. All the equines at the sanctuary around with were tested positive for Lyme. What? What does that even mean? I need to make a note. I need to make a note of that because I have no idea. You've got it. It's an excellent topic that I am going to make a note of so that I don't forget, because you know I just kind of get on to the next thing. Then I'm going to talk to my vet about next time I talk to him, which should be pretty soon because I need to talk to him about a couple things. But I'm going to write down Lyme disease, shots, problems. What else do we want to know? Solutions, effects. Okay, thank you. That's a good one. I like it. I don't know it, but I want to know. And when they were tested positive for Lyme disease, did anything get done? What did they do? Or do you not know? I mean, 80 plus horses all tested positive? That seems excessive. David, no, I don't do my own teeth floating. I have not learned that skill. I think that it's something that requires a lot of time to understand and get used to. I think I could probably do front teeth if I wanted to, if I needed to. I would be a little bit worried more about back teeth. And then the other side of, I mean, floating is one thing, but you have to be able to do an inspection of the teeth. And I mean, I'm subscribed to enough groups and I've read enough books so far that it would be way out of I don't even have the tools for it. You got to be able to keep the mouth open. I would probably be doing the horse a disservice if I went and did that. No. My vet's really good with that. He's an expert in the area, so I just call him up and have him do it. But I'm there watching every time. I'm in there like a dirty shirt. So, anyways, yeah, Victoria, we get the flu. The horses get the flu around here as well. So yeah, that's the other vaccination. So there's rhino, West Nile, influenza, tetanus, and then there's one more. I wonder if it's rabies. I don't think so. I'll have to ask. Yeah, it was just, it might not be treated. If a horse has Lyme disease, if it's not affecting them, maybe it doesn't get treated. Maybe there's nothing to do. So, yes, Carla, moving on to Coggins. Okay. The Coggins test is a test devised quite a while ago, in the 1970s sometime, by this doctor named Leroy Coggins. And he came up with this test for the equine anemia. What's the other word? The colloquial term for it is actually swamp fever, which is interesting. But it mainly comes from, or it only comes from the transfer of bodily fluids. So it's sort of, like HIV, I guess. It would be the equivalent of it in the human world, where you get this deficiency of iron. They're anemic. The horses get very anemic. Some horses can die quite quickly from it. Some horses get very poorly affected by it quite quickly. And by the time you're like, hey, what's wrong with my horse? You call the vet, they're already dying. There's nothing. There are a couple of solutions, supposedly. Suppose you can get there's one that's I think made in China, one that's made in the States to deal with this, but I don't think it's available in Canada, because when I was talking to my vet, he says if any horses fail the Coggins test, you're probably going to be putting them down. So that's a big deal. Anyway, so the Coggins test is a check for. Oh, now it's bugging me. Just give me 2 seconds here while I find the last word for that. The equine infectious anemia. That's what it is. So it's only in horses. It's very transferable through blood mostly, and it's a virus. And so they do have somewhere there's the ability to get rid of that, but we don't. I don't think we have that here. So the reason why the Coggins test is so important is it's going to be able to tell whether or not your horse has the equine infectious anemia or swamp fever, as it's known. Um, and you're going to need to know that because it can be passed quite quickly between horses, but mainly in the summertime or late spring or mid spring to sort of late summerish sometimes, because there's so many mosquitoes out there. And the mosquitoes will, obviously they'll go suck blood from one horse and then they'll wander off to the other one. And right there is where the transfer happens. So, talking to my vet about it, and I say, well, where does this most often happen, and why does it make it anywhere around here? And he says, well, what happens is there are really nice people that go out and they go try to save these horses from the backcountry, and they're not fed well or not cared for, or nobody's there to care for them, or they're wild horses that are their environment is being threatened and they're probably not going to survive anyways. So people will come along and try to rescue them, take them out and put them into a care center. And then from there, they sort of get dispersed throughout a bunch of areas. And it's at that point that you have to be concerned about whether or not any of them have this virus in them. Because some horses will live for quite a while. They'll just kind of go along and they'll be a bit anemic. They won't really put on weight, sort of lethargic. They won't be really much good for riding or doing much with. And especially if they're losing weight as well, because they won't have as much energy. They don't have, they just can't do as much. So then they get sort of farmed out to different places that people are rescuing horses, or they want to buy a horse and they're really super cheap or free because they came from the backcountry. He says, and right there, these horses come to, places like here or other barns, there's 5 or 6 horses, or maybe there's even more. And that infected horse, maybe it's kind of okay. Maybe people are like, well, if I just feed it enough alfalfa, or I'll give it a bunch of grain, or I'll just keep chucking hay at it until it puts on weight, because it's from the back country. And out in the back country, well, they don't get fed so well. And because they don't get fed so well, they're going to be a little bit low on weight, and so on and so forth. And so you make a bunch of excuses as to why this horse might be having a problem with their weight or their energy or their muscle. And the reality is they're infected. They got this virus in them that's just destroying their cells. So the other thing that actually get transferred through is horse flies and deer flies. Those big, huge flies that just terrible. And the other way that they get infected is if there's a mare that is pregnant, has a foal, and then the foal will also obviously have the virus. So. Anyhow, and then also veterinarians or people who are sort of backyard veterinarians that are taking care of their horses, if you don't use a fresh needle on every horse, you can actually pass, which is crazy. I don't know anybody who wouldn't do that, but I guess it gets done, save money, or you just figure it's okay or something like that. You use a needle on one horse and then use a needle on the other horse and happily passes through. So the as you can probably tell where I'm leading to in this part is that okay, so going back to what the Coggins test is, the Coggins test developed by Dr. Leroy Coggins 50 years ago or so, test for this very specific virus. And then if it tests positive, you either kill the horse, or I guess I don't know, I think it's treatable. Let's see, when did they find Okay, so I'm just reading about quarantine. We need to talk about quarantine. Because some horses don't show any clinical signs. So, I'm trying to find one. I found there's a vaccine for it. Yeah, there's one in China. It's been used there since 1983, and supposedly one in the States. Anyways, the bigger deal about getting a Coggins test is veterinarians can't do it, and you can't do it. You have to send the blood into a government registered place, and they will tell you whether or not that horse is positive for the virus. And when your Coggins test comes back positive, if you just got your horse at your place, you're like, oh, that sucks. But if your horse has happened to go to a barn that has any amount of horses, the whole barn goes under quarantine. And not a horse can go or leave. And it's recently, actually, there was one last year, I think, out in Vancouver, and there was a horse that had been possibly tested or was positive for Coggins, and they shut down the whole thing. The whole barn got shut down. It's all quarantined. You couldn't go in, you couldn't go out with a horse. They all had to stay there. Nobody could leave whatsoever. And every single horse there had to be tested. So they quarantine the whole place. They take that horse out and quarantine it even in more separate place. But the whole place goes under quarantine. No horses in or out whatsoever. And then they have to test all of them. And this can take a long time, depending on how many horses there are as well. And I think they have to be tested twice. So they get tested, and then a couple of weeks later or a month later, they have to be tested again. And only then, once it's confirmed that everybody's clear, and only then, once everybody's been confirmed clear. Can you imagine? 2 weeks in, nobody's got it. Everybody's like, okay, breathe easy. A month in, they test. There's one that has it, maybe, right? They take that guy out 2 more weeks plus 2 more weeks, and then you're hoping again. So while the disease itself might affect only one horse, and it might not even adversely affect them, they might be like, yeah, I'm fine, just a little low on energy, or they're really adversely affected and they die. The ramifications throughout the horse world is a big deal. And so that's why I sort of wanted to bring this up. Maybe I should have led with this, because this is a really big deal. But the Coggins test must be done if you're going to cross the border, and it definitely should be done going from anywhere in any back country whatsoever to a more populated area. So if you're going to buy a horse, or you're going to adopt a horse or something like that, or you have a place and somebody wants to bring a horse in, and they're thinking, and you're thinking, I wonder if the horse is really, is it up to date on stuff? Has a veterinarian checked it out and whatnot? You'll want to know. You'll really want to know, because if their horse has that problem, you bring it in, and you've got your horses and other people's horses and stuff like that, and it happens to not pass, it happens to have the virus, then every other horse has to be checked out. Every other horse has a chance of dying, being euthanized, because you can't take those horses anywhere unless the vaccination actually, or not the vaccination, the what is it? Yeah, it's a vaccination. A vaccine, not a well, I guess it's a vaccination. It's a vaccine. Anyway, so the vaccine does work and kills it off, and then you got to test and test and test. But that risk is so high. So, besides doing vaccinations for your horses, the Coggins test is more the bigger topic that I think should be brought to a higher level in the horse world. More and more people should be aware of this at a higher level. And I don't know how many people are actually aware of that. And I don't know if it applies to anywhere outside of North America so much. I guess it does, because obviously the Chinese are, is it? Yeah, so I guess everybody, we all need to worry about it. But don't, if you've got a place, don't accept any horse in without a positive confirmation of a negative test result, like an actual piece of paper, or and it has to have the markings of the horse, it should have the name of the horse, the age of the horse, should have the location that it's done. You should be able to get a hold of the vet and be sure of that, and make sure that everybody's safe for it. So obviously there's the horse's life that must be considered, and every horse's life that must be considered, but the other thing to think about is how much it affects the rest of a herd, or a whole barn, or the people who have those horses, because everybody loves their horse, and you don't want to put their horses at risk. So Coggins test, very, very important. And some places say that you should be getting it done regularly, once a year. I don't think that's a requirement whatsoever. Once your horse has been confirmed and it's within a herd that's been confirmed, then there's no real requirement to do that. I think it's more of a fail safe, just to be sure. So anyway, so I wanted to bring that up. It's sort of a small topic. There's not a lot to say. There's something to say, and it's really important, but there's not a lot to say, I suppose. So, um, oh, and it has to be. Carla says it has to be done or current to go anywhere here. There are actually a lot of requirements when going to shows and competitions that your horse has to show a negative Coggins test result to even go to these things. So anybody coming here, David's asking, do you have a checklist of stuff? We usually ask people to provide, if we know where they're coming from, if we know where the horse is coming from and it's a safe barn, there's nothing going on, everybody knows everything's fine over there, then it's fine. If we don't know where the horse is coming from, really, we'll say, look, we need to make sure the horse is up to date on vaccines, has a negative Coggins test, and has been looked at reasonably recently. Obviously, if it's had its shots, probably going to be looked at by a vet. From there, it's sort of owner's responsibility and the barn manager's sort of responsibility to see what the horse looks like when it shows up. Is it underweight? The other thing to be concerned about is lice. Horses commonly get lice, and it's a real pain to get rid of, and they'll be super itchy. You also have to worry about whether or not they have worms, so you have to test fecal count there and see how wormy they are and maybe worm them. So there's a bunch of things to think about, but they're really, really, worms and lice is a big deal because it's a pain. It's not going to kill the horse. They just get itchy, so you just deal with it. You powder them or shampoo them, whatever method you use to get rid of lice. You do that, and they're fine. For worms, you worm them. You worm them. You give them medicine that kills off the worms. You do it again in a couple of weeks, and it really kills everything off, and you're done. No big deal. But the infectious anemia and vaccines to make sure that your horse is not carrying is important. So I thought I'd put that out there and see what you guys have to say about Lyme disease. Is a really interesting one. The fact that 80 horses had tested positive for Lyme disease. 80. All 80. That's weird. That seems weird. That seems, are you sure? Kind of thing. That's I sort of think that. I'm going to talk to my vet about that and see what he has to say. Because I have no idea. I wish I knew. But I will know. Now that you brought it up to me and I think I don't know, I will know. S. Gibson, welcome. Yes, you've caught the live stream, the unscheduled. And no, Carla, you didn't add to the list. I was going to talk about Coggins for sure. It's actually in the title of the video because I knew that it was going to be important. It's a good one. It's a good one to bring up if you didn't know and you thought, hey, you should talk about this. That's a good one. Teresa says fly sprays help repel ticks so you can lessen the worry of getting Lyme. Yeah, some fly spray mixtures work okay. We have a really hard time with the fly sprays we have here. The water-based ones are mostly useless, we found. The more oil-based ones are a little bit more effective. They stay for longer as well, so you're not spraying all the time. But keeping off the mosquitoes and the ticks and if you can keep off lice somehow, that's great. All the little bugs that want to come in and sort of chew on your horse and do things, especially if they have a wound, an open wound of some sorts. You really want to protect them from that because you don't want a whole bunch of bugs coming in and bugging your horse, and then they go and bug the next horse, and pretty soon everybody's got what everybody's got. So, yeah. Let's see. Any more questions in here? I know this might be a short one. So, coffee time. Anyway, so that is actually the sort of the short version of everything. But if you weren't aware of the Coggins test and you're on the fence about vaccines, again, I think vaccines are a great idea for things that are prevalent or that are more common in your area. Each area, I think, is going to have a different selection of vaccines that are regularly used, and then making sure that your horse does not get the swamp fever. Because if it does, it's a really big deal. I know in the States as well, you have to report to the federal government, and they too will put a horse under quarantine, a whole barn under quarantine. And if you're a reputable place, and you get a reputation of that you had a horse there with that problem, it can also affect everything professionally as well. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal. Okay, I don't know if I have any more questions. It's not showing up on my chat there, but I thought I saw something come up on the phone. Let me just triple check. Let's see. How often do you vaccines? Vaccines are done depending. I think it's depending on the vaccine. Some vaccines last longer than others. So you'll do a vaccine, and it'll be 6 months or something. You might need a booster. Some vets say you can do an initial dose, and then in 6 months or 3 months, or I think even maybe some are a year, you do another booster sort of deal. And some are every 2 years, depending on which ones you've had done. They'll do them at different intervals. And I don't know the exact interval of that. And I certainly wouldn't want to suggest that you do a particular interval, because that would be more of a veterinarian question. But I would suggest, talking to the vet, just say, what are the, and you could talk to more than one vet, get a bunch of opinions. That's totally cool as well, I think. Ask what are the intervals, why are they accepted that way if you want to, and do that, and then from there make a decision. But it's really up to the owner in the end. There's no regulation in this regard. There's nobody running around making sure that your horse is vaccinated or it can't, whatever. So for some reason I'm not getting the chats in here. Oh, there we go. Okay. How do we know if a new horse has had or been exposed to strangles? The only way that you're ever going to... the horse medical world is really difficult. In my opinion, I think it's really difficult. Okay, there. When you get a horse, or your friend gets a horse, or you have a place and somebody brings in a horse and stuff like that, I can't even count how many stories I've been told about how somebody got a horse and they heard about what the medical problems might be. They heard, some history from the owner or the previous owner or a friend of the owner or a friend of the son, whatever. And then they get the horse and they start working around with the horse and they find out that everything that they were told was wrong or partially wrong or some subjective term of wrong. Like, oh yeah, my horse is up to date on stuff, and you find out you've had one vaccine and maybe the teeth were floated 2 years ago or something. And to them, that's up to date. So it's subjective. There's only one way to get an objective understanding of what has been done to your horse and what your horse has, and that's to get vet records. Veterinarians, I don't know if there's a regulation or a requirement, but veterinarians keep records of horses for a very long time. So if you can track back to where that horse came from, the veterinarian that was taking care of it, they will usually have the records. So I wouldn't say that you would know one way or another if a horse had strangles or some other problem. What are you going to do? You have to get that. You have to be informed. You have to be willing to have somebody come in and test for things and check for things, and that's how that works. So yeah, I don't think I would know. I don't think you'd know by observing or looking at a horse whether or not it had strangles. It's a good question. Maybe there are some telltale signs, but I would still say it's still subjective, still just an observation. So that would be my suggestions. Have it checked out and find out the vet records if you can get them. My senior was subjected when she was young, but I don't know how she's ever had them. My friend just put her 4-year-old in with a contagious horse because she wants him to be exposed. I wouldn't do that. I don't think anybody should do that, personally. So wait a second. So let me get this straight. There's a 4-year-old horse in with a horse who has strangles to be exposed to strangles? Have I got that right? Uh, uh, I would probably stay away from that if I could. I think that I wouldn't put my horses anywhere near anything that had strangles. I don't. I would probably ask questions. I'd say, what makes you think this is a good idea? What happens when your horse gets strangles? How are you going to then uh, have that horse around any other horse? Because I'd say the majority of the population is going to say, I don't want your horse near my horse. And now you've got two horses that have strangles rather than one. So seems odd. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I don't think. Nope. Good question. Thanks for asking. If you're wondering, a registered American quarter horse. Yeah, registered doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to find records, unfortunately. Registered just means that you've got a piece of paper that can track back their lineage. And if you're lucky, if you're really lucky, you might be able to find some vet that has some record, and they might be able to. I mean, there are a lot of veterinarians out there, but I don't recall my vet asking for papers when he was treating my registered horses. I don't recall him saying, "What's the registered number?" So I don't know how many vets take down the registration number of the horse. If they do, I think that's probably good. Hopefully, you can search, with a a query to their system that says, "Hey, it's 5632 something, whatever the number is of the horse," and then it would just pop up. It would be nice if there was some kind of national or even an international system, but that'll never happen, I don't think. You can track her owners because of the papers. You can see every owner she's had. If that only accounts if the papers have been properly transferred between people. Some people, they'll get the papers and they won't transfer them to themselves. They just keep the papers. And so the horse can actually pass between owners without transferring the papers. As long as the papers are signed, then the next owner can actually transfer the papers if they want to, because it costs money. It costs money. It's kind of a pain in the butt. And so there are actually a lot of people, if they don't really care that the papers are to their name, that won't even bother transferring their name or that horse to their name through the papers, because it costs money to do so and there's no actual benefit. So hopefully you can do that. Don't get me wrong. I hope you can. But even still, even if you could track down every owner, hopefully it's just a couple owners kind of thing. Especially if you can get back to the breeder. The breeder will have records, and then from there, maybe just a couple owners. But if it's a horse that's been passed around quite a bit, yeah. You told her it's a bad idea. She wants to get into where she's young to build immunity. Yeah, or get infected. It's not good. It's not a good idea. I think it's a bad idea. And if anybody's watching this, don't do that. It's not a good idea. Yeah. There's just no good reason for it. There's so few horses with strangles that to build up an immunity to strangles seems like a risk that you wouldn't really want to take, because you're probably going to infect them. Yeah, I think. Isn't that how it works? I think that's how it works. Is it worth it? I mean, do you send your kid to daycare or school so that maybe they can get the sniffles and stuff like that and catch some colds and whatnot, and as they grow up, so you want to be around people, so you want to be playing in mud, or you want to be these ideas of get outside and get into the environment so you can become more immune to stuff that's out there, so that when you get older you don't get hit as hard because your body's been slowly built up. So I don't think that applies here. I don't know if that really apply. Anyways, stop clicking. I hate clicky clickers. Okay, that's about it for now, I think. Keeping my opinion clean. Okay, me too. I keep my opinion very clean. So that's it for now. That's health stuff. I mean, there's piles of stuff to talk about health for horses, but we're talking about things to do with the bloodstream, vaccinating, vaccinations, diseases, viruses, and stuff like that. It's really important to stay on top of that stuff, and because it's not just for your horse; it's for other people's horses. And even if you don't think that your horse is going to be around other horses, you never know. You don't know. And if the unforeseen can happen, you get in a car accident and somebody's like, "What do I do with this horse?" They have to come and take the horse. The SPCA goes and gets the horse or something like that. Whatever your association is there that comes and rescues horses and stuff. They might come along and like, "Oh, has this horse had any shots done? How do we even know?" And they find out from the vet the horse hasn't been looked at for years or something. Now they got to give all the shots, and they've got to give booster shots, and hopefully the horse has nothing. They got to do a bunch of tests, or just put it down, just kill it. See, it's not worth the time or money. So things to think about. Yep. Anyhow, so I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to get on with things. I've got to get some supplies today. Got an appointment, got to trim, got to build. It's a good day. A little rainy, a little bit sort of foggy outside still, but it's supposed to clear up in the next hour or two, and then it's on with things. So it's exciting. Can I share some good news? Leslie, please share some good news. We love good news here. You're welcome, David. I am most of the way through my coffee. After watching the videos, you're able to load your horse. Good, good. How'd you get it done? What'd you do? How'd you load your horse? I'm actually interested. First time since her accident. Oh yeah, well while you're writing that out, I'll actually talk briefly about horses that get in horse trailer accidents. It's super common. I mean, horse trailers are just a place waiting for something bad to happen. If you're not quite careful and you keep up with the upkeep and don't get in accidents and stuff like that, then most of the time it's fine. But if something's going to go wrong, it's going to happen in a small space, it seems. So yes, I do remember you talking about that your horse did get in an accident and you were having trouble. And I think it's great that you got your horse to load up on a trailer. They can be fixed. They can have new memories there. And so you set her up for success. It's good. How'd you do it? I'm actually curious. Carla, thank you. Yeah, it isn't looking bad here. I've always kind of liked it, but it's really starting to come together. Loaded my senior first who will stand forever. I did a video a little while back, and it was called having a buddy help train or something like that. And we had a horse here that wouldn't load onto a trailer very well. And essentially, you work at it, and you get something kind of okay. And then you go and grab a buddy, and you put the buddy in there. And then that horse will say, "Oh, well, maybe it's kind of okay to go in." And they go in. And then they might pop back up because they might be really afraid. You work at it a little bit more, and maybe they go in by themselves, but they can't stay in there. And then you bring another buddy back, and you put the buddy in there, and then they're in there with a buddy, and you lock them both in there kind of thing. And now they each, that scared horse looks at the not scared horse is just eating all the hay and stuff like that, and they're just fine. So I think what you did, let me just read this. Loaded my senior first, will stand forever, then slowly worked on 2 steps on ramp, then off and changed her thoughts. I went back to all 4s on the ramp. The ramp is a big deal for horses. It's no different than the step ups. They'll put their front feet up just fine, and they'll stand there and they'll be kind of okay, but you'll just be forever working on the back feet. And the ramps are no different. It's weird, some horses will just stand with their back feet just an inch off of the back of the ramp. It's not even a step up. It's an actual ramp going up into the trailer. And when I put all 4s, and I walked away, went back, walked off for a few minutes, no asking to move. Yeah, still going. That's good. Anyway, so I'll explain. I'm probably going to explain exactly what you're doing, which is great. So you get them up there, and they start to kind of get up a little bit more and a little more pressure. And if you happen to have a buddy that's already in there, they're going to be more inclined to want to go in. So you do. It's exactly what you said. You set it up for some success because the draw is there. You're going to provide a little drive. Maybe you can have a little draw, but that other horse is going to provide a lot of draw. And if that horse is super calm and super cool with trailers, they'll look at the other horse and say, "Yeah, it's all good. I'm fine. I'm eating hay. Do you want to eat hay?" You know, maybe they say that. I don't know. They walked away, went back, watched the stuff. Started to panic, but I put no pressure on her. Just stood calm. She looked at me, and then over at the scene. Oh, I can't stress enough. I can't wait to see the next sentence. But there's so many times eating hay. Let's go all the way in. Exactly. There's so many times that horses get really worked up over stuff, and you'll have them just running around like crazy, just losing it, going backwards, maybe rearing up, maybe they're running around bucking a little bit or something like that. And there are a lot of people, and I don't know if I can tell all the stories that I know. I'm going to generalize. I know this is one of many. This is a generalization of a bunch of stories into one story, so you don't apply this to one situation, but I'm gonna make it sound like it's one story. So I know of a horse that when asked to do particular groundwork, just loses it, just can't handle it whatsoever. And there was a person that was working with that horse that every time that this horse would not do what it was told to do, that person would ramp up like a lot. And say it was a maneuver that, if there's a scale of 1 to 10 on easy to difficult, 10 is difficult, 0 is easy. Say it was a level 5 sort of difficulty level, somewhere in the middle, 4 or 5, something like that. And the horse would just lose it, wouldn't be able to handle it. So the person would ramp up and say, well, you know, this horse knows what I'm asking for. It knows what to do. It's just not doing it. It's being troublesome. And the horse would just get worse and worse and worse and worse. And of course, as the horse gets worse and worse, the person gets worse and worse. And so, Leslie, I'd have to say, eating hay, yeah. Then just move to the side. She walked right in her straight style, started to eat hay, exited her to win, had her stand each other for a few minutes and let her out and seen her. It's perfect. So as that horse is getting sort of, all built up and angry, or not angry, and scared and worried and evading and, at a high chance of hurting himself, especially in a trailer, and then you now have another accident. The best thing, I think, for almost all situations, 90% of situations with horses, is to just be calm and patient and quiet. It's a recipe for success that a lot of people have a hard time, myself included. So I'm not outside of this realm of a lot of people. Struggle with it because it's scary. It's really scary working with horses. And that's anybody who says that it isn't scary is lying. In my opinion, either that or you're ignorant. You have no idea of how hurt you can get. It is scary. You can get really, really hurt, especially in trailers. You can get squished, stomped on, killed. And that should be in your head, So getting excited and being big and trying to force any horse to do something is a recipe for some sort of disaster. And so being calm, doing what you did, and bringing in a real quiet horse, and all of this is just huge, just perfect. I can't. Thanks. No, I'm glad I was able to provide some kind of information on how to get that done in another way that maybe you haven't seen before, hasn't been presented. But it's all you. You did that. I didn't do it. I didn't do anything. I just sort of do my own thing, and you watched a little bit. But that feeling that you have to give a horse, you must give a horse a feeling of calm, reassurance, quiet, and they must know. And I didn't understand this for a couple of years after being told this particular statement. But after I understood it, I've never changed. I've never gone back since. Horses must know you will be patient with them. They must. You must be able to teach them, I will be patient with you. I promise. And they will then calm down and realize that they have some time to think. So it sounds like exactly what you did. And another horse was there saying the same thing. It's okay. We'll be patient with you while you lose it. Present a danger to everybody around you. We'll be okay. We'll be patient. Nuts. It's crazy. Okay, moving on. Leslie, good job. Way to go. I look forward to hearing more about it. Let's see. Carla says, "Do most Carla, aren't you working? Didn't you say you had to go work? Somewhere up in here it says you have to go work. Do most boarding facilities welcome volunteers that you know? No, not necessarily. I think that volunteers are good ones are not hard to find per se, but reliable or something that somebody that comes more than once. So because when people show up to volunteer, they might think, "Oh, this is too much work. Oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to get dirty. It smells bad. I had a scary moment. I'm not going to come back." The process of sort of vetting, uh, acclimating, and teaching and introducing all that takes time. It takes time out of the day to talk to somebody and say, "Hey, this is the fences. This horse here is whatever. This is how we feed. Blah blah blah." And so you got to do that whole introduction phase. So I think some places are like, "Oh, there's been so many people that have shown up for one day, and I spent all this time, and I thought they'd hang around," because it's an investment into that person that uh, you know they're going to learn some stuff and so on and so forth. So anyhow, I don't know. We have volunteers that come here all the time, and most stay. Most have stayed. Few have kind of come and then they go, and um, but most people love it here. So thanks, David. It looks amazing. He says, "Yeah, it looks good. It looks good. You're a big help on Sunday. Thank you for coming." Um, but yeah, good job, Leslie. That's great. Any advice on controlling COPD in horses? What's COPD? Um, then Leslie, you're welcome. You're very welcome for whatever. I mean, whatever I could help out with. Whatever. Yo, you're at lunch, are you, Carla? Okay, good. And trying to watch this while doing schoolwork. Schoolwork, eh? Midwest Horse Show this weekend. Never went before, so don't know much about it. Mounted archery competition. That's cool. TP and W. T-Pan W is what I call you. Um, Mounted archery is really cool. I've seen a couple of competitions, and just some people are just amazing. Some people suck, but you got to start somewhere. But some people are just, holy cow. I mean, how long do you have to practice to get that good? I mean, I saw a picture recently of this lady that had jumped off a diving board and was shooting an arrow uh, just about to dive. And she shot an arrow. I don't know if she hit the target. It didn't show that part, but yeah. Hmm. Anyways, what's COPD? Did anybody answer that? Breathing difficulties? Cardiopulmonary disease. Oh, man. Cardiopulmonary diseases are better prevented than cured. A lot of the problems in horses' sinuses and lungs come from feeding. I'm not saying this is what's happened or that somebody has had happened, but a lot will come from dusty and dirty hay. And it's not just dusty and dirty hay, because you can feed dusty hay. I mean, some hay just shows up with dust because they they do the haying in the summertime, and it's going to be super dry. So what are you going to do? I mean, there's going to be some dust kicked up. It's going to get into the hay. You can soak it or wash your hay, if you've got that going on. If I had a horse that had heaves or COPD, yeah, see, causes heave, lungs, or draws for breath. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, and you'd be well advised to soak or wash your hay. I mean, you're just sort of hosing it down a lot of times, just to keep that dust down as much as possible. You don't want to introduce any more of those sort of spores. You want to watch for hay that has sort of funguses or is kind of rotting a little bit. Most of the time, people will treat it or help prevent it further from worsening by washing their hay. Or steaming it. Actually, you could. That's true. But steaming takes electricity and or gas. You got to heat the water, and it's more expensive. So a lot of people don't do that. They'll just take a hose, maybe with a nozzle on it, and just spray as much as you can. Because if you're going to serve it up in a hay bag, you wouldn't really do this if you put it on the ground. You'd have it in a hay bag so that it could drain too. You don't want to just have soggy hay sitting around, and then. But the bigger problem, actually, the most common, from my understanding, the most common reason this happens is not because the hay is dusty or full of, whatever. I mean, that's a good cause of it. But that the hay bags that are hung up for what is essentially a giraffe. Horses weren't meant and should never, in my opinion, eat with their head at wither level or higher. Their nose should be down, chest and lower. Now, that's an opinion, but it is backed by some science, because essentially what's happening is every time your horse goes to eat, if it has to put its head up, then any of that stuff that it shakes out of the hay bag is going to go straight into its nose. If they're facing down, then gravity says, no problem. It's going to keep washing out stuff, because the nasal, the system, the everything here is going to create water and a flushing system. So if dust gets in there, we naturally start to sniff more, because our nasal system is creating a way to flush that out so it doesn't get in. But if the horse has to put its head up high to eat, and remember, it's eating a lot of its day if you're giving hay bags regularly, and if it's up like this, then they have to actively put their head down and blow out stuff. But if they're always putting it up, sooner or later it just keeps going in and keeps going in and keeps going in. And so feeding them up high, anything chest and higher, I think is detrimental and ends up causing that problem. So bye Carla. And so you're to not have it happen, or to not prevent, but to reduce the risk of it happening for sure, feed low, and hopefully it won't happen. So, but yeah, if you got to deal with it, then I think there are other ways as well. But for just daily stuff that you can do, is just keep your hay cleaner, wash it, soak it, steam it. A lot of this is a big thanks to you. If child of use, I'll do a short loading practice. Is that okay? Can I do too much? No way. You can't load your horse enough onto a trailer. Load your horse as often as you can. Every day if you had to. Every single day. Twice a day. Who cares? Do it as much as you can. Just make sure you end up on something good. If you just want to get a little bit done, just get a little bit done. And then get out. Get onto the ramp. Take off. That'll be your practice. That'll be what you do. So, lots of good experiences. You build it up. You just keep building up and up and up. So, what else we got? That's it. I think that's it for now. Yeah, health stuff is a big deal. There's so many things out there. There's so much sort of differing opinions and ideas and stuff. So, I always just sort of look at it as, why does it work? How does it work? Is it where's the proof that it works? Oh, Margaret, when you swear in the chat, I actually have to approve it. Maybe rewrite your sentence. I'm trying to keep it kid friendly around here, just in case. Once she let's end it on a good note. Yeah, for everything you're doing with horses, whether it's the needle thing where you're trying to get needles figured out, just end on something good. You can always build up from good. If you go downwards, then you've got to build up from down, and then it takes a little bit longer. But if you've got to, say this is where your horse is at and you want to get up here, maybe this is your goal, somewhere around here. And maybe you just get a little bit, and then right here you stop. and then you get a little bit. Maybe you just stay even, but if you're going down, um, you know, so be patient. Don't worry, Margaret. It's a good sentence, but just try to just change your last word. Getting and rehabbing an ex-racehorse information. Ex-racehorses. Oh man. Some are good, some are not so good. Depending on their history, depending on how they're treated. I mean, some racehorses are treated great. I mean, actually great. You know, people are nice and they're groomed carefully, and they got a race, but they got a race. But overall, they're treated, you know, kindly. Um, some, but usually they'll be pretty jacked up. You get them, and rehabbing them requires a lot of quiet. Take them back to being a horse. Take them back to being a quiet horse. Have them make some good friends, uh, and acclimate them to quiet people, quiet situations, and just keep building up from there. There's too much to cover in this little chat. Plus, I got to get on with things. But my easiest advice, probably for every horse, anyways, but for these ex-race horses that are used to being pretty jacked up, when you go to get them, they gotta be you know, vibrating practically. So. Quiet, a lot of quiet, a lot of quiet work if possible. You just keep building up from there. You just keep that quiet going to the active stage of their training. So anyhow, that's it for now. I think I'm going to get on with things. Hook up the trailer. I'm going to do some raking. I've got my list of stuff that I got to go pick up, so I got to go pick up that. I got to check on gates. I got to get some gates. It's exciting. You guys haven't seen the second part of the paddock build, but it's really coming along. Hopefully today gets me that much farther. And then tomorrow it's going to rain. Thursday's supposed to rain, and then Sunday's supposed to be kind of sunny. So that's it. Thanks everybody for showing up. We had a whole bunch. I mean, I think it got up to almost 30 people in here for an unscheduled live stream. That's pretty good. Anyways, moving on. Thanks everybody for coming. Great questions. J. Lou. I'm looking into Lyme disease for sure. I really like that question because I didn't know it. I like questions I don't know. I will look that up and get back to everybody. You're welcome, S. Gibson. It's great. It's been good. I really enjoy these things too, you know. So, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow, actually, for the second part of the build, and I'll probably start working on the 5th day stuff as well. Paddock building is a big deal. I find that, you know, a lot of stuff that I do, I kind of learn along the way. I look at other places and I think, I don't know if I do that, or why did you do that, or something. And there's very little information out there, sort of the thought process and the planning of it. So, you know, hopefully it helps somebody. Okay, so that's it. I will see you guys again tomorrow. Thanks for coming. Have a good morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you're at. A good sleep, maybe, depending on where you are in the world.